across the world. So can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so yesterday we talked about banks, so we won't spend time on that. Today we will discuss about Basel norm, and then we also discussed about secondary or stock market, IPO, and then what are the various processes that are followed when company wants to raise capital, from stock market. So we will start our discussion on Basel norm. So basically, this name Basel is coming from one of the city in Singapore. Sorry, in Switzerland, and this is basically a kind of international banking regulation. So when we talk about Basel norm, it is known as international banking regulation. Like in India, we have most of the regulations are coming are suggested by the RBI. So RBI is basically one of the regulatory body or body that frames various guidelines. Similarly, for international banking or for all the banks or banking system across the world, these Basel norms are created or guidelines are created. So this is a basically top committee you can think of that suggests certain guidelines. So this is basically suggestion, and it totally depends on country or country's central bank whether they want to follow or not. But majorly, it is followed, and there are the reason. We will see why we are saying generally it is followed. So basically, what is the what these guidelines are? These are basically an effort to coordinate the banking regulation across the globe, because all banks are integrated. We have seen they are integrated when they are lending and borrowing. Domestic companies which are operating in another geographic location, or they are providing some kind of loan to non-host country or non-domestic firm company, maybe originated in US, and they are operating and they want to take some kind of loan. So that's why these kind of complex borrowing and lending activities are happening across the world, and banks are one of the facilitator. They are helping these institutions or corporations, and that's why global standard or global practice is required, and that's why these norms were suggested. So basically, these are set of agreement, whatever norms we will see. These are set of agreements suggested by a Basel Committee of Banking Supervision, and focusing on the bank risk and risk of financial system. And when we talk about Basel Committee, so basically Basel Committee is one of the primary global standard guidelines setter for banks, all the banks that exist. And it was established by G10, Group 10 countries in 1974. So this was the year when it was conceptualized by G10 countries. And then membership based on country specific interest, like UN. When it started, United Nations, there were fewer number of member countries. But later on, most of the countries they find United Nations as a group where they can get various support. So same way, membership. Many countries joined in 2009, and also other countries joined in 2014. So right now, if you look at more than 45 members from 28 different jurisdictions, they are part of this basically committee. Means whatever guidelines are going to prepare, these members or countries are going to follow them to improvise their banking system. So far, there has been three Basel norms: Basel 1, or Basel 1 guideline, Basel 2 guideline, and Basel 3 guideline at three different time periods. So what is Basel I? So basically, when we talk about Basel I norm, it was conceptualized or introduced in 1988, and the total focus in these guidelines were on credit risk. Banks are one of the institutions that provide credit to various bodies. It means when a bank is giving a loan to n number of institution, because of bank having this kind of risk, because probably these three may default or another three may also default. It means banks are very much prone towards this kind of risk or credit risk we can call. So understanding the bank specific functionality, Basel I norms highlight what should be done to improvise or to at least reduce credit risk in the banking system, right? So you can think of the core of Basel I guideline was on the credit risk of banks, and various suggestions were given. We will look at those suggestions. Those suggestions were given by Basel Committee so that banking system can be improvised, especially on credit risk dimension. So when we say about credit risk, credit risk is basically related, to the bank loss when borrower is not able to pay back. It's very, general definition. So to avoid or to minimize the credit risk, one suggestion was given. What suggestion was given? That bank will maintain a minimum capital of 8% of risk-weighted asset by all the banks. So what this committee has suggested, that each bank has to maintain at least 8% of capital of its asset. Asset means whatever loans are given. Loans are basically asset for the commercial banks or banks. So 8% of that should be maintained, and that 8% will be basically risk-weighted asset. Why risk? Because your bank gives 1 year loan, 5 year loan, 10, 20. There are various maturity or various duration. So understanding the analyzing certain weights for these different type of credits offered by the bank, weights were assigned, and then considering that weight, 8% of total capital was suggested that bank should maintain to minimize or to avoid failure of bank because of credit risk. And in India, it was implemented in 1992. So it was introduced in 1988. But in India, it was probably post LPG liberalization, globalization. So it basically in India it happened 1991. So after that, banks, Indian banking system, it was framed in 1988, and bank started using it in 1992. And in India, we started following Indian banking system, started following from 1999. You can understand that initially in 1991, when the major reform happened in India because of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. So that time was very uncertain. So after certain time period, around 7 years, this India has adopted Basel I norms, and then Indian banking system started following it, considering the credit risk in the banks, in the Indian banks. Now, Basel II. So when Basel II was introduced, remember Basel I was basically conceptualized 1988, and then finally, so a few companies started following these guidelines from 1992. So almost it took 4 years to implement. Basel II guideline were introduced in 2004. And in this additional, factors were considered. What factors were considered? Basically, in initial case, if you look at in Basel 1, credit risk was there, and it was suggested that bank should maintain some kind of capital to avoid credit risk. So this was already part of that. Basically, name was given capital adequacy requirement. And this capital adequacy, if you see, is nothing but 8% of risk weighted asset that bank should maintain at least 8% as a capital adequacy ratio of total risk weighted assets. Apart from this, so this was already there in Basel 1, and apart from this, two additional condition. One is supervisory role and market discipline were introduced. So what is supervisory role? Basically, bank were needed to develop and use better risk management technique in monitoring and managing all three type of risk. What are the three risks for banks? Credit risk. So already here, in terms of credit risk, this was capital adequacy was introduced, market risk and operational risk. Because when banks are operating, they have also their own certain risk. So that's why these supervisory review was introduced in Basel 2, which was different from Basel 1 now. Apart from that, market discipline. So what market discipline we are talking about? Basically, a kind of bank needs to mandatory disclose CAR and risk exposure. Because when, basically CAR is nothing but a capital adequacy ratio. So about this. It means banks should look at how they are having, what kind of exposure they have in terms of credit risk, market risk, and operational risk. Apart from that, banks should also have some kind of disclosure so that they will be able to see how within the banking system, how they are performing. Because when they can see that, one bank is not able to follow these guidelines, so they may want to make certain changes. So these were three major, guidelines that were given in Basel II norms. The overall, if you look at all these guidelines are, prepared to strengthen, to make banking system more robust. And Basel III was basically introduced post 2008 crisis. So we have seen in 2007 and 2008 what kind of uncertainties we have seen in various markets, triggered from one domain, it went to another domain. And if you look at the main problem of this crisis was the liquidity. This was the main concern. And if you go and review certain papers around 2008, everybody will say that the main problem or the main factor that made 2007-8 crisis more severe is the absence of liquidity, and that has made this problem very severe. So Basel Committee has identified that liquidity was one of the major issue in 2007-8 crisis, and that has really affected all the banks across the world, all the institutions as well as corporations. So considering that this guideline, Basel III guideline, which was introduced in 2004, first one, remember, introduced in 1988, Basel 1. Then second was introduced in 2004. And then third one is introduced in 2010. So, you can see, over the period of time, these different guidelines were introduced. So their focus was capital. So capital was a common factor in Basel 1, Basel 2, and Basel 3. So this is the what capital adequacy ratio we have talked about. Leverage means level of debt. It was another concern, and also the liquidity, funding, and liquidity was the third major concern or third major key key focus point in Basel III norm. So we will look at how these three dimensions are addressed. So when we talk about capital, basically the first dimension, we are again talking about capital adequacy ratio. So initially capital adequacy ratio was 8%. In this, it was suggested 12.9%. And in terms of tier 1 and tier 2 capital, remember yesterday we talked about tier 1 capital. Tier 1 capital is capital of the bank which is more liquid in nature, and bank can easily estimate what is the current level. So in terms of tier 1, the minimum, and tier 1 and tier 2, it should be 10.5 and 2%. But in total, all bank has to maintain capital adequacy ratio 2.9%. And in addition, bank have to maintain capital conservation buffer of 2.5% and counter cyclic buffer also between 0 and 2.5%. So basically, this plus additional 5% for these two factors. Additional 5 means 2.5 and counter cyclic buffer capital of maximum of 2.5. So overall, bank has to maintain around 18%, 17.9% as part of capital adequacy, or some other form of capital that can save bank because of credit risk. Now, second point is leverage. So a leverage rate has to be at least 3%. So basically, leverage rate is what? Leverage rate is the ratio of tier 1 capital to total consolidated assets. When we are talking about asset of the bank, we are basically referring to their various loans offered or credit. Those are basically major assets for the bank. Now, third point, which is the liquidity. So two type of liquidity ratios were suggested that banks should analyze. One is liquidity coverage ratio. So basically, liquidity coverage ratio require banks to hold buffer of high quality liquid assets sufficient to deal with the cash outflow encountered in the acute short stress scenario. So basically, if you remember, this part is generally controlled by RBI. When we talk about CRR or SLR, so it is suggested that this liquidity part should be taken care of based on country specific guideline or scenario. These can be specified or suggested by the central bank of respective country. So what this will do, this will avoid bank run or situation where bank may not have enough capital or enough fund to serve their customers, because chances are very likely that if bank is falling short on liquidity, then they won't be able to return money to their customers. So that's why this is basically controlled, that this should be maintained and this should be supervised by the respective central bank. And deadline, and regarding this deadline was suggested that it was introduced in 2010, and then there were several delay in implementing in India, and still banks are not following in India to this Basel III guideline. Partially, you can say that partially it is followed, but in full spirit it is not followed. It was suggested that it will be adopted in March 2020, but post COVID it got delayed. So still you can think, you can assume that Indian banking systems are following it, but not in full spirit, not completely. Partially it is being already followed, because if banks are following Basel 1 and Basel 2, probably Basel 2, so certain guidelines are already followed, but not in complete sense. And as I said that when we talk about tier 1 and tier 2 capital, so tier 1 capital refers to core capital, equity, and disclose or reserves of the bank that we can see, and you can easily compute it. Whereas when we talk about tier 2 capital, it is volatile or less reliable, and it is difficult to liquidate, because banks also maintain certain assets. Bank maintain, they can also purchase security, invest in other alternative investment alternative, and that are calculated based on the market condition. So you can think of those are not easy as banks reserve, equity, and core capital are, and that's why tier 1 and tier 2 capital for each banks are classified. I have also put additional details, so in case you want, already we have covered it, so in case you want, you will be able to see. So this is what we should know whenever we talk about Basel norm and related to banks. So you can see all these three norms or guidelines were proposed made to ensure that banks are not going to fail, because once one bank is going to fail, it will create a trigger for entire banking system, and it will keep on there is a concept, we call it hot potato concept. Like when you carry one hot potato, what you will do, you may want to pass to someone. So if you pass to someone, another person will also feel that heat of that potato, he will pass to another one. So ripple effect or hot potato kind of effect you will see. So that risk will keep on transferring from one bank to all the banks. And then what will happen, entire banking system will be in trouble. So this is what we should know, because there are numerous other things that we may have covered, but because of limitation, we have covered concept related to central bank functionality, corporate bank, their structure, then cooperative bank, and Basel norm. So I believe this will be helpful to you to, if you want to go for further reading. Let's say if you have more interest in banking, you have n number of resources. But as a beginner, these things may be, these guidelines or our discussion may be helpful to understand how banks function, and then how what are their primary role. Yeah. If you have any question, we can take it. Otherwise, we will start another topic. Yeah, students, any question? So we will start another. Yeah.
Sir, could you please go to the Basel non-2 slide?
Okay. So are you able to see, or okay? I think I have.
Sir, your screen share stopped.
Yes, I'm just resharing it. Yeah, can you see?
Yes, sir. Sir, in this, the market discipline aspect, banks are supposed to disclose their risk exposure. Sir, is risk, the calculation of risk is dependent on how that particular bank calculates it, right?
Yes. So let's say if we want to, what I have done for each guideline, I have added here. So here calculation, because we were not interested in to go into more details. Yes, you are correct. This is based on risk calculation, and here you can see what I have done. Here we have major differences how Basel 2 and Basel 3 guidelines are slightly different. Basically, the major difference when we talk about market discipline means banks are not going to be going to evaluate themselves alone. The bank should also keep disclosing about the current status, whether about their risk exposure, what kind of capital adequacy, whether they are following or not, so that entire bank, all the banks who are part of banking market, banking system or entire market, everyone is going to see. Otherwise, let's say one bank discloses their risk exposure, or if bank is not disclosing that, they are into trouble, and they keep operating within the banking system, then what will happen once it is known that this bank is in trouble? That time all the banks will have trouble, because proper disclosure within the banking system was not done. So means self-regulation or self disclosure was one of the main guidelines that was suggested in Basel II norms. And here, if you want to read more, so in this slide I have given you a link, bis.org. So you can get more detail how each components are calculated, and what were the implication of each guidelines. So those details you can get it. Fine.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, because it's like Basel itself is very big topic. Even when we start each and every guideline, you will find various implications. So that details I don't think we need at this point of time, but based on your interest, what exactly you want to explore, I believe you can take it further. Fine. So I'm can we move to another topic? So I'll open another topic, which is basically more or less some of you may be aware of. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So so now we are going to talk about one of the component of market. Basically, when we say financial market, there are various components. You have capital market, you have forex market, and based on your term means whether it is long term and short term, your money market. And when we say capital market, when we are talking about capital market, we can think of these exchanges. And the reason why we are calling it capital market, because these markets are prime source for capital raising, your primary source of capital. Why we are saying primary source? Because various corporation may approach to these markets and then raise capital. So this is the prime objective. And not only these corporation, basically, if you go look at debt market, because here you will have two classification. you will have debt market or bond market, or you have equity market. So these institution or government can issue either bond or equity instrument for raising capital. So it means within each capital market you can have two sub market, debt market or an equity market, and whether company wants to go to debt market for raising capital or company wants to go raise equity or through issuing stock. So it is up to the company. So in this topic, we are going to look at equity part. So that's why within the capital market, we are going to discuss about the stock market or equity market, how firm can raise capital from equity market, which is part of your broad capital market. More or less, we have already discussed. So valuation part, if you remember, initially we talk about valuation. So basically valuation is, one of the component when we talk about capital market. Valuation of bond, valuation of preference share, valuation of common equity, that we have already talked about. So those part we won't be covering again in this, but especially, primary part, primary raising activity, we will focus more in this module. So as we have seen that capital market, we can classify into two categories, primary market and secondary market. So when we say primary market means when first time or follow up, when company wants to raise capital by issuing share. So by issuing stock or share, we call it capital raising activity, because what new shares are going to be, or new stocks will be going to be introduced, and then you will have owners, those who are interested to buy, they will come forward, they will subscribe and get ownership of shares of those companies. So this is the first objective, our first part, because capital market or stock market first role is allowing company to raise capital by issuing new share, and second part is when these are being traded, when these shares are issued. So it will issue and then you can buy and sell on NSE or BSE. It means when trading is happening, second part happens, which is price discovery process. And why price discovery process? You think of, let's say, when initially shares were introduced, let's say 100,000, 1 lakh shares were introduced by a company, and then when they were introduced, price of each share was ₹50. So total value when it was introduced, market value you can think of, assuming that this is the indicative price or first price that you observe at which these shares were introduced. So if you look at this, so basically 5 million INR is the value of the firm. But this is the static value, because if you take this, then you cannot think of fair valuation, because when company keeps operating, company will take these capital, company will introduce, invest, new machinery will be purchased, new product will be sold. So you can think of that after that many things are going to happen. It means there should be a provision where we will be able to re-evaluate this price. And this happens in secondary market when buyer and seller are able to trade. Because when they are going to trade, then they can decide the fair price. Why we are calling it fair price? Assuming that the way buying and selling is going to take place, price of this particular firm that has issued 1 lakh share will reflect their operation. So chances are very likely that, if company is doing well, price may go up. Let's say it becomes, 100. So value of this firm will become basically how much it will become 1 billion INR. So this price discovery, you can see that price discovery process is not directly going to provide capital to the firm, but for fair valuation, whether company is utilizing the money properly or not, that is going to be done. And that's why we call it functionality. Major functionality of secondary market is the price discovery process. Now this is, how in primary market transition happens. Company wants to issue stock because company cannot issue. Company will take help of investment bank or merchant bank or lead manager. So through lead manager, all the stocks are issued, and in return, fund comes back to the issuing company. So this is how primary market operates. So more or less, we have seen that what kind of role this capital market performs. So basically, it measures the company performance when we talk about fair price or price discovery, and also tells about at what financial position companies are. Because when companies are listed, they will have to provide certain information. They will have to disclose, because otherwise SEBI or SEC in US, these regulatory body won't allow companies to be listed or to use public capital. So these fair valuation or these market, helps to know what is going on in these companies. You can look at balance sheet. More often, company will try to provide information through various channels. Also, you can go do continuous valuation for share and firm as well. It provides liquidity because company can raise capital, and if company wants to invest, those capital can be utilized. Apart from that, these market also a place for new innovation. New innovation means new instruments are you can see are coming up. So it gives an opportunity for various corporations, various regulatory bodies to come up with new instruments. Like initially, we never thought of that we can have derivatives or future and options. But because it was required that this kind of instrument should be there based on the preference of investor, these instruments are now available. So that's why these platforms, these markets, capital market, are place or platform for new innovation. And also allow risk diversification, because if on NSE, if you have choice of trading, let's say around 1500 stocks or companies, these many companies are traded. So it means, because each company will have different type of risk profile, so each will have different risk profile. So when you have 1500 firms, so you can basically diversify your risk, because you may want to pick combination of high risk and low risk firm. So it allows investor to diversify their risk. It also helps foreign investor to come forward and invest. So when we are saying foreign investor, we are talking about FIIs, financial, your foreign institutional investor. Or many times you will find FPI, foreign portfolio investment, like foreign institution invest in stock market through through FPI, portfolio investment. And this also provides an alternative finance, because otherwise what will happen, most of the company will only go to bank for whenever they need capital. But when you have a strong capital market where company can go and raise capital by issuing new instrument, basically they have more option for raising capital. So in primary market, we can classify all these issues in various category. Like when we talk about public issue, basically we are talking about IPO, initial public offering. Initial public offer or offering. This is follow on. F stand for follow on. Public offering. So when we say initial public offering, you think of company when company is going to raise first time share. So those kind of issue we call it IPO, initial public offering. And once company has already issued share and further want to dilute its ownership and issue more share, company can do that by follow-up offering. So these are the basically two options when company wants to raise capital through public issue. Right issue, basically by name itself, this is some kind of right or option given to existing shareholder. So let's say company has already issued 1 lakh share, and assuming that company having these many shareholders. Now company wants to raise further capital. So what company can do, rather than going to this FPO, company may want to go for right issue. What right issue company may issue? Company may ask these existing shareholder that if you want to get additional share, some kind of right. Right means a kind of option is attached where you can get additional share by paying for right. Right means option, some kind of additional price you pay, you will be able to get share. So those kind of instrument we call it right issue. Whereas bonus issue, many times company wants to give incentivize their shareholder. So either company can give incentive by paying dividend, or company can go provide some kind of bonus share. So what will happen in case of bonus share? So let's say each shareholder is going to get 1 share. So ownership won't change. You are going to get more share, and it will be on proportional basis. So ownership won't change, but number of shares are going to increase. So this is how bonus share or bonus issue works. And third type of issue. So these are basically a kind of public or normal issue. Another option is there that company may go and issue share or issue stock to private placement. Generally, when we say private placement, we are referring to private institution. Private institution means it is not going to be offered to public. It is going to be offered private institution, and generally you will find number of institutions will be 49 or less than that. So this is what norms are there when company wants to raise capital in primary market, and we will see what are QIP and preference issue in subsequent slide. There are various guidelines whenever a company wants to issue IPO. So there are basically certain norms. So you can get all these details here. I have taken from this source, from SEBI website. So more details can be accessed, but because we should have some clarity. So first entry norm, or one condition when company can go for raising issuing IPO, we call it entry norm 1 as per SEBI. Sometimes we refer at profitability route. So what we are meaning by profitability route, basically these conditions. First is net tangible asset of at least 3 crore. in each preceding 3 years, of which not more than 50% are held in monetary asset. However, the limit of 50% shall not be applicable in case of public offering is made through offer of sale. Offer of sale means, it is sold to all allotments are done through your merchant banker. Offer of sale. And second condition, minimum of 15 crore or average pre-tax operating profit. And that's why we call this entry norm, or because this condition as profitability route. Net worth of at least 1 crore in each preceding of 3 years. If company has changed its name within 1 year, at least 50% revenue for the preceding 1 year should be from the activity suggested by new name, new entity basically. And the last one is the aggregate of proposed issue and all the previous issue made in the same financial year does not exceed 5 times of its pre-issue net worth. So these are basically the condition when a company can approach to SEBI for issuing IPO under the entry norm 1. Second is QIB route. QIB means qualified institutional investor. Basically, banks. We will see. I have definition. Your mutual fund, your financial institution that are registered with SEBI as QIB. To them, company can issue. Like if you see here, company can issue a share through private placement as well. And these type of 2 other either QIB or in terms of preference issue, it can be issued. So this is basically second category, second option, second way by which company can raise capital or issue IPO. So what this condition suggests that issue shall be through book building route. We will see what is book building route. And 75% of net offering to the public is mandatory to QIB route. And third option, appraisal route. The project is appraised and participated to the extent of 15% of financial institution or commercial bank, of which 10% comes from the appraisal. Basically, appraisal means these institutions. Second condition, minimum post-issue face value of capital should be 10 crore or be compulsory market making for 2 years. So basically, these are 3 different channels or criteria. If company is able to fulfill, they can go approach to SEBI for raising capital through IPO. Now, how pricing is set? So basically, pricing of, because when company is going to issue share, there will be price on which people who are interested to buy, they will be bidding or they will be submitting their application. So 2 options are there. One is fixed price issue and second is book built issue or book based on book building process. So in fixed price issue, what happens when issuer is who? Basically company. When issuer at the outset decide the issue price and mention it in offer document, and it is commonly known as price. One price will be mentioned by the company. Let's say company mentions that share can be purchased at 150 rupee, and let's say lot size means minimum share that you will have to purchase is 20. So this kind of year company is giving you one price. It means this is a fixed price issue. Second option is book built issue, where price will be discovered or decided based on the book building process. And when company is going for this, in this issue, company to disclose all this information about the price band, especially in case of book building, price band at least 5 working days prior to opening date. It means 5 working days should be given to the interested investor to participate in book building process. Bank, any company cannot do issue IPO by just giving 2 days to apply for. And also price or price band are price band information you will find in red herring prospect. We call it RHP. So red herring prospect is basically a document that includes details of new issue as well as the price. In initial offer document, price may not be stated, but in red herring prospect you will find information related to price as well. So what is the book building process? So basically in book building process, 2 bands. So basically this is a price discovery process. What happens? Company takes help of merchant bank or lead manager, and they decide 2 prices. One is floor price and another is ceiling price. So these 2 prices are decided. Let's say this is 100 and this is 120. And the gap between these 2, ceiling and floor price, cannot be more than 20%. So you can think of this is 100, so this will be 120 or 20% above this floor price. So this is how, and on so these 2 prices will be mentioned and in the red herring prospect, and investor will submit their subscription form to buy this any price between these 2. So basically they are going to bid. You may want to buy, let's say you think that this company is not good, I'll only pay 101 rupee. So you are going to submit your application such saying that this is what I'll pay, or you will be paying. So 101 will be for you, and another may find this company valuable. They may say that I won't mind paying 120 rupee per share, means ceiling price. So within these 2, bidding will happen, and once bidding is done, then cutoff price is decided. Cutoff price means price. So cutoff price. So cutoff price, let's say, comes around 112 rupee. It means shares are going to be issued at 112 rupee when it is going to be introduced in the market. So now those who submitted their subscription form at 101, they will be asked to revise their amount and buy at 112. And those who have paid 120 rupee to buy, let's say 1 lot or number of shares, they will get 8 rupee back, or there will be some kind of refund. So this is how book building process take place. So this is going to be cutoff price. Cutoff price will be based on demand and supply, basically book building schedule, and that price will be introduced. And then if these people are interested to pay additional 11 rupee per share, or they want to revise it, they can get it. Otherwise, it will be allocated to interested parties. And when we talk about investor, we can classify investor into 3 categories. Retail investor, basically individuals like you and me. Qualified institutional investor, and those who are not individual investor or QIB, they are called as non-institutional investor. And when we talk about retail investor means investor who applies or bid for a security not more than 2 lakhs of rupee. Means you cannot buy n number of share. Maximum that you can invest to buy share is 2 lakh. Then you will be classified as a retail investor. When we talk about QIBs or qualified institutional buyer, basically mutual funds, venture capital fund, foreign venture capital, these are basically part of QIB. Apart from that, foreign institutional investors, scheduled commercial banks. As I said, banks can also participate in the market. So these banks can also be defined as QIB. Public financial institutions, multilateral development financial institution, state industrial development corporation. So, you know, and provident fund, because in right now in NPS, you can see, you know, money are also invested in equity market. Then it goes to, you know, government security, and also it goes to a debt market, or sometimes you will find in LIC. So basically these type of institutions, they also put money or they invest money. So these are basically also part of QIB. And those who are not part of QIB or a retail investor, they are basically called as non-institutional investors. So yeah, I think few slides are left. So what I'll do, I'll upload these 2 slides. So a question won't be asked beyond this. So in tomorrow's quiz, up to QIB, up to this basically, not QIB, up to these 3 classification, up to this slide, question will be asked. And quiz 2, because quiz 2 is scheduled as I informed, quiz 2 will be scheduled for tomorrow morning during the class time, and up to this. So what I'll do, I'll upload this slide as well as all the previous commercial bank slide, your commercial bank and cooperative bank, as well as central bank slides. I'll immediately upload on MS Team. Do you have any question? If you have any question, we can take it. Otherwise, tomorrow
Sir,
I'll be, yeah.
Sir, will there be an entire syllabus from quiz 1 also for quiz 2?
No, three things. Central bank, I believe central bank, commercial bank, and cooperative bank, and this equity market.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Whatever we have covered, yeah, whatever we have covered in, let's say, after quiz 1. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, yes, fine. So I'm closing today's session. In case you have any additional query, you can message me or you can call me. We will be able to discuss. Fine. So thank you.
Okay, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.